Let me read to you a passage from the 13th chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel, verses 47 to 53. It's the Gospel for Thursday of the 17th week in Ordinary Time Year 2. St. Matthew writes, Jesus said to the disciples, "Once again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was let down into the lake and caught all kinds of fish. When it was full, the fishermen pulled it up on the shore. Then they sat down and collected the good fish in baskets, but threw the bad away. This is how it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." "Have you understood all these things?" Jesus asked. "Yes," they replied. He said to them, "Therefore, every teacher of the law who has been instructed about the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house who brings out of his storeroom new treasures as well as old." When Jesus had finished these parables, he moved on from there. That's from Matthew chapter 13, verses 47 to 53. And what does it suggest to us? Well, I suppose that ever since the establishment of the press and the daily tabloids, the news, whether community news or national or international news, has been prominent in daily life. We all think of the news. And as far as the press is concerned, the news is a very marketable product. But a further question is, what do we do with the news? Or more exactly, how do we think of it? I think that for most, it is just like a recreational diversion. It keeps life interesting and is a break from the grind of daily work. But many do reflect more deeply on the flow of human affairs, and some engage in deeper thought still. They philosophize about the course of human history. Now, there is a question that ought to occur to those who follow the affairs of men. And that question is this: how will it all end? By this I mean, how will the course of history end? This is not just an academic or theoretical question, because any end of a thing has significance for the present. We do things now in view of what we expect of the future. If we know what is ahead, then we act accordingly. The end of history is a question which I think rarely occurs to most people, for they tend to think that history will simply go on and on with the rise and fall of regimes and civilizations. But it will not be like this, the end I mean, because God has revealed that the history of mankind and the world will come to an end, and that end will constitute a new and final beginning. Our Lord in our Gospel passage today that I read gives a simple parable drawn from everyday life, in which the fishermen at the end of their catch sort out the good fish from the bad, and the bad they throw away. And our Lord tells us that this is how it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The emphasis of our Lord's teaching here is on the fact of hell, a place of eternal punishment for the wicked. The great point of our Lord's parable here is that at the end of history, as at the end of life, there is the judgment of God, and those who have done evil and have not repented will be thrown away, which is to say, will be condemned to hell. So, we do know where history is heading. We do know what the climax of history will be. It will not be an unending flux and flow of regimes, hegemonies, and civilizations. It will not be an unending and futile struggle for dominance among powers that wax strong and then decline in a form of old age. It will all come to an end, and that end will be the judgment of God on all peoples. It is described in more detail in the 25th chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel, the same Gospel as our passage today is drawn from. In that chapter, the King takes his seat on his throne of glory, and that King is Christ, the King of kings and Lord of lords. He will divide the sheep from the goats, and those on his left will be sentenced to everlasting fire, with those on his right received into an everlasting bliss. Now, the agnostic, the atheist, and the religiously indifferent will look on this as perhaps mythical, but it comes from the word of the Son of God. It is he himself who will be the central protagonist. Every man and woman in human history will see that day and will be drawn inexorably to one side of the division or to the other. It will be unavoidable. Which side it will be will depend entirely on how he or she lived in the flux and flow of human history. Then eternity will begin, and it will be either heaven or hell for each and all, an eternity of happiness or an eternity of misery. Those who had died before this great event, which is necessarily by far the majority, will no longer be just spirit, but body and spirit once again. Then, of Christ's kingdom, there will be no end. There will be only one kingdom for all eternity, and one King and one Lord. All other kingdoms will have gone. This is the end of history, and it means that it is ultimately this which all ought to be preparing for. The purpose of life and of history is to prepare well for the final day when all will be judged and either admitted to the eternal kingdom of heaven and God or cast outside of it forever. This kingdom has begun here on earth, and it consists essentially in union with Christ, and he is found in his body, the church. What I have said is not a fairy tale. It comes from the mouth of Christ himself. Christ has taught more about the last things facing man and the world than any other human teacher. If we want to know what the future holds ultimately, then study the teaching of Christ on the judgment of God on each individual after life and on the world at the end of time. Study what he says about what follows this judgment. Let us then live in the light of these final realities, because they are unavoidable